Glove80 by MoErgo joins a growing list of split, programmable, ergonomic keyboards. So how does the Glove80 stack up against the likes of the Advantage 360 from Kinesis and things like the Moonlander from ZSA? The short version is that this is a very comfortable board thanks to the key wells and the choc switches. And it's also quite fully functioned. It's fully programmable, wireless, it's got RGB, and it's also a chunk of change cheaper than the Advantage 360. So is that it then? This is it, all wrapped up? This is the keyboard you should buy? Well, not so fast, Batman. Whilst there's plenty about this keyboard I do like, there are some things that I'm really not keen on. So water me a little bit and we'll get into this. The Glove80 comes nicely packaged in normal enough, cardboard, very minimal plastic. You've got some QR code there for the manual and a nice little message there. Nothing to shout home about, but certainly no lost points either. And the associated literature, whilst it's not pre-printed in the package, is actually top notch. There's literally nothing in there that I was trying to find the answer for that I didn't find inside that manual. Now, at the back of the board, you can see here there's a push button on-off switch there, and there's a USB-C port. That's the same for both the halves. To charge the Glove80, you need a USB-C cable in each of the halves, and that charges the rechargeable battery inside. Now currently you can use the Glove80 in one of two ways. You can either have it fully wireless, which uses low power Bluetooth, or you can plug the left half into your computer and have the right half talk to the left half via Bluetooth. And from all intents and purposes, from the computer's point of view, that sees that as a USB keyboard, even though all the communication is done via via Bluetooth between the two halves. There are rumours coming that the base software for this program, ZMK, will at some point get full USB connectivity, but that isn't a thing yet. Running on just the Bluetooth, it lasts ages. We're talking weeks. With the RGB, about 3.5 minutes. But obviously, as I'm over 16 years of age, that's not a problem I've really encountered. I don't run boards with RGB running all the time. So far, all very positive. However, when I did get the board out of the box at first, I've got to admit, I was a little disappointed. You see, the Glove80 has the price tag of a premium board. And when I first got it out of the box, I just didn't think it felt very premium. It just didn't feel particularly robust. Now, let's be clear here. I'm not saying that it isn't robust, I'm just saying that that isn't the sense I got when I got it out of the bag. There's a lack of size and there's a lack of weight. The size more so, this is a very thin board, and you can see there, it's sort of made out of what it seems at first like a fairly sort of cheap plastic. You can maybe see there as well, like the fit and finish isn't perfect in all places either. And then there's little things like on the back, you can see there the screws being silver, and I can't understand why they didn't just use black screws. Like there's the Moonlander, for example, by comparison, and the main screws, if you ignore these sort of 4 mounting screws in the middle, all the screws black on the bottom of a black board. Yeah, so same deal with the Advantage 360, black case, black screws. Just little touches that I think are the minor things that improve the overall feel of the product. Now, to be clear, this airiness, this lightness is by design. MoErgo set out to make a light, a more portable ergonomic keyboard, and in that respect they have certainly succeeded. Its footprint is considerably less on the desk than something like the Advantage 360, and because of the choc switches that it uses, it also sits far lower to the ground whilst you're typing. And it also has a slightly, it has less of an incline between the pinky and the thumb than, say, the Advantage 360. Now, I don't know whether that's a good thing or that's a bad thing, that's merely an observation. Weight-wise, half of a Glove80, including the wrist rest, weighs in about 235 grams, while the comparatively porty Advantage 360 comes in at 758 grams, which is over 3 times the weight. And then somewhere in the middle you've got something like the Moonlander, which with its wrist rest attached, that weighs in at 360 grams. So that gives you an idea of just how much weight you are saving with this device. So you can look at this lack of weight, this lack of bulk, as a good thing or a bad thing. For me, for somebody who's used to these sort of weightier, what I feel are more premium feeling keyboards, at first it was a bit disorientating, if you like, to move to this much lighter board. The biggest downside for me about the lack of weight and the lack of bulk with the Glove80 is how that relates to the acoustics. Now, the Glove80 comes with choc switches and only choc switches, and that's good in a lot of ways because it keeps these keys very low to the ground as you're typing them, gives them a much shorter travel. than a traditional MX switch like you'd find in the Moonlander or the Advantage 360, the Digma Rays, any of the sort of normal programmable split boards that I've looked at here. However, this is using a red choc switch, and I'm not sure how well that gets picked up on the microphone, but it's quite sort of pingy feeling by default. And I think that's important because unlike the Moonlander, but like the Advantage 360, because of this curved keywell, it's just not possible to get hot swappable switches. So whatever key switches that you get are actually soldered into the board, so there's no easy swapping of these switches out. Now I find the reds, they're quite a noisy switch anyway, but in this enclosure it almost amplified the pinginess of them, so as you're typing, or as you can hear this ringing of all the tiny springs inside the switches. There is also an option that MoErgo do if you can order the keyboard with the switches but not have it soldered. I would probably recommend that if possible, if you don't mind doing the soldering, simply because then you can either lube the switches that come with it or put your own choc switches in, if that's something that you're sensitive to. Now, plenty of people are just not going to care about the acoustics. They're in it for the ergonomics, and they're just not going to notice the sound of this board at all. So for them, disregard everything I just said. You don't need to worry about that. But for those that are picky about the way that the keyboard sounds and how it feels, my recommendation is this is with the red chocs, and then this one is with the white clickies. And I much prefer the white clickies. If you've got to make a choice between them, I've not tried the browns, but the white clickies I think suit this board far, far better. If you have got the glove, let me know which switches you got and how you find them in the comments. I'd love to know. The Glove80 can also do tenting, so that you can alter the incline of the board to suit how you like your hands to be as you're typing. And to achieve that ends, to achieve both the keywell and the tenting, it uses these stilts, which you can see at various points around the keyboard. Now, I'm not really aesthetically a fan of those stilts, I have to be honest. I don't particularly like the way that they look. I'd rather have something that looks sort of fully enclosed like the Advantage 360. But the truth is, after you've had it on your desk for a few hours, you don't even see them anyway, so it's really not something to get hung up about. And the good thing about this tenting system is it does let you achieve some quite dramatic tenting, because these things just sort of screw out to a point that you're comfortable with, and there's some extra lengths of threads inside the box as well, so if you want quite extreme tenting, that's something you can achieve. The downside of this system for me is the fact that if you travel with this board quite a lot, which is something that MoErgo is trying to appeal to because it's this lighter and easier to carry keyboard, changing this tenting position, you imagine you go to work and you want to set this tenting up exactly how you want it each time. It's quite a tedious process. At the very least, you're going to have to do that on 3 feet on each side. And there's no markers on these legs, so getting them exactly right compared to each other and however you like it is a bit tricky. You can, of course, you could stick a blob of glue on them or something like that to get the right point. But I feel like this is perhaps a bit of a missed trick, and in a future version of this, maybe we'll see something akin to like a seat post on a mountain bike or something like that, some way of maybe using a cam to lock off these feet in a certain position. So as it is, they're perfectly functional. I just don't think they're particularly elegant in terms of a solution. Opening these up at the beginning of the day, screwing them all back down again at the end of the day, that's going to get old pretty quick. The built-in wrist rests are easily removable. It's just these 2 thumb screws for each half. And the good news is these thumb screws, they do get retained by the wrist rest. So you're not going to lose those, and that makes it an even smaller footprint when you've taken the wrist rest off. That solution, absolutely fine. Perhaps not as elegant as something like the Moonlander, which just has this sort of funky twist and pull it out. I think that's particularly good implementation, but it is perfectly functional, so nothing to worry about there either. Now, although the Glove80 is going to be great for travelling because it's so light, it doesn't come with any sort of a carry case, but that's the same deal with the Advantage 360 as well. That doesn't come with a carry case. The Moonlander does come with a sleeve. The Digma Rays has a great carry case, so that is something, if you're going to travel with this board, you probably do want to get yourself a carry case of some sort. MoErgo have told me that they intend to release a carry case down the line once the sort of the main initial batches of the keyboards have gone out the door, so that's something to look out for, because that's sure to fit it much better than any you know, sort of off-the-shelf solutions. To actually type on, which is obviously quite an important consideration for a keyboard, the Glove80 is a triumph. It's very, very comfortable. I don't particularly overuse the thumb switches. There's a whole sort of movement in ergonomic keyboards to say that people should be using the thumbs more because it's the strongest joint. For me personally, of all of the digits that I have, the only ones that have ever caused me any kind of RSI-like problems are the thumb joints, and so I tend to not load up an awful lot of functionality onto the thumb areas. But the Glove80 with this 6-key thumb cluster is very, very comfortable, and it's also quite clever in that it's got this slight raised section for the top set of keys, so it does make it easier to discern each of the keys in the cluster. You've also got, for fans of function keys, a full set of function keys at the top. Now, if you're a Vim user like me and you're used to a keyboard without a set of function keys, you need to get used to the fact that every time you bash the top left-hand corner of the keyboard, you're going to be bringing up the help in Vim. But obviously the solution's there. You can disable it in the key map, or, you know, just get better at typing. You know, and importantly, these choc switches, which I've spent a bit of time moaning about, particularly the reds, are actually very, very comfortable to type on over long periods of time. That small amount of travel does pay you back somewhat. The keycaps themselves are quite smooth, and initially I didn't really think an awful lot of them, but it turns out they're actually made of a material called POM, which on the white set is actually quite important, because hopefully you can see there that they look completely opaque by default, but when you put on the RGB lighting, the lights actually shine through, which is a very sort of neat touch. The POM material is very sort of smooth to the touch, so you tend to get on things like on PBT, like the Moonlander keys, they're quite rough, which I quite like that. And at first I wasn't sure about the smooth nature of the POM, but over time I've grown accustomed to it and I really quite like it. The other one that I've got here, this has got the blank keycaps on. I prefer the blank keycaps, I think, even though they don't shine through. That's an important thing to note. If you go with the black keycaps, they remain opaque. There's also no homing keys by default with the normal standard set of keycaps, but you can get, with the blanks, you can get the ones with the tiny little homing bumps on. Like the 360, because of the keywell, you don't really need the homing keys as much, I would say. These homing keys have got a very, very subtle couple of bumps on there, which have actually stuck the other way up because I find it better that way. But I'm not sure they really add much, to be honest. And even though they're very inexpensive, the extra homing keys, if you hung up about it, probably get them. But I'm not sure they make an awful lot of difference. But you probably aren't going to need them because the keywell kind of guides your fingers to those homing row positions anyway. It's worth noting that these keycaps that come with it are MCC profile, which is a profile that was designed specifically for the glove. If you want to get different aftermarket choc keycaps, you can, but don't go for something like the Work Louder sets, which aesthetically might look very good, but due to the curvature of the keywell and those sort of keycaps being quite deep, there's a good likelihood that they will collide within the keywell. Another point on this keywell, it isn't quite as high compared to the keyboard as on the Advantage 360. So that's the sort of profile that you're looking at with 360, and you can see that the thumb cluster, I'll try and hold that level for you, is quite a bit taller than the keywell, whereas it sort of slopes slightly away on the, let me just get you this, where's the best place, maybe that sort of level. It's quite a sort of flat profile there. Again, not casting any judgments there, that's just something to relate to you. So in terms of typing comfort, I don't really have anything negative to say about the Glove80 at all. I've been running it for a month every day, had no problems, very comfortable, and I think all other things being equal, it's hard to argue against a Keywell being a more comfortable typing experience than a flat keyboard. Now, if you've seen any of my other keyboard reviews, you'll perhaps have picked up on the fact that I'm not really a big fan of RGB lighting. I don't really feel it adds much to a product. However, the Glove80 does something quite clever with its lighting. If you press what's called the magic button, which is by default the bottom left of the Glove80, you'll get the LEDs actually lighting up to tell you something. So the top 3 keys show you whether caps, num or scroll lock are active. The next row down is showing you which layer is active. Now, I'm pretty pedestrian, so I only have 2 layers, but for those of you that have a bazillion, this can show you the first 6 of them. The next 2 rows down show the battery power from left to right. More lit up is more power in each half. And then finally in the left thumb cluster is your device information. So you've got 4 Bluetooth connections there and 1 USB. Purple means nothing paired or connected. Red's paired but not connected. Green means it is connected but not the current output device, which is useful if you toggle between a couple of computers or computer and a phone, for example. A white one is showing you that that is currently the output device, which means that's where your key presses are going. And as I said, beyond the information that's given in the lighting in the magic layer, the Glove80 has complete RGB lighting, which is quite unusual, particularly on a curved wireless board. That will impact your battery life significantly. So that is just something to keep in mind if you go down that route. But if you've been hanging on for a split curved keyboard that also has RGB lighting, this is probably the keyboard for you. The Glove, like the Advantage 360 Pro, uses ZMK keyboard software, which is an open source software. That's the basis of what it runs on. Unlike the Advantage 360, I haven't had any problems whatsoever with connection issues with the Glove80. It has just worked. I've switched devices, it works, I turn it off and on, it just connects. Not had any problems at all, which is quite different than my experience has been with the Advantage 360. So much so that on the back of using this Glove80 for 3 or 4 weeks, I'm actually sending my Advantage 360 back to Kinesis just to check that there isn't a problem hardware-wise with the Bluetooth modules. That's how much better the Glove80 has been in terms of connections. And in case you missed it back at the beginning, just remember this keyboard is fully programmable. So that means you can do stuff like auto shift, which I'm a fan of, which is where you press a key a little bit longer than normal and you get the shifted version of that key. You can also have things like mod taps. So for example, you might have your escape key be escape when tapped, or you can press and hold it to get hyper, for example. Endless possibilities. They are all available to you with this sort of a keyboard, which is fully programmable. And getting these sorts of things set up on your keyboard is another area where the Glove80 trounces the Advantage 360. The Glove80 is the best example of a web-based ZMK configurator that I've come across so far. It's genuinely usable. You log in, you create your key mapping, and you can just set everything that you want to do in the web configurator. Where ZMK configurators have always failed in the past is if you want to do anything out of the ordinary, anything that isn't just a simple key press, you've always had to break out into your text editor, into the code, and set the stuff up there. The MoErgo configurator for the Glove80 bypasses that a little bit by having one of the options for each key being custom. And when you choose custom, you can paste in whatever bit of ZMK code you want to execute on that key. And that's been very useful for me because I've been able to lift a whole bunch of the stuff that I'd set up for the 360 straight into the Glove80. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have to find some snippets of code for the more adventurous stuff that you want to do, but there's every chance you can go onto either the ZMK or the Glove80 Discord servers, ask for what you want, someone's give you a chunk of code and you can then just copy and paste it into the configurator. It'll still let you save all the drama of having to have GitHub, text editors, pushing and pulling to GitHub repos, stuff of that nature. Maybe I'm so impressed with the Glove80 configurator because I was so appalled at the mess of the Advantage 360 story in that regard. But it works very, very well. It's much quicker than the GitHub-based builder of the Advantage 360. You set your key map, you click build, it makes you the file, you download the file, and it's the same file that you flash to each of the halves. Now let me just temper this enthusiasm for the configurator slightly and say that as good as the MoErgo configurator is for ZMK stuff, it's still nowhere near the majesty of the ZSA configurator for the Moonlander. That is perhaps the gold standard of key map configurators. With ZSA, you can just set it all up online. You don't even need to flash a file. You just have it connected to your computer and the web configurator can flash the file straight to your keyboard. It's all completely seamless on ZSA, and so these other solutions have a way to go before they reach that point. But if you're after a wireless board that can do all this sort of stuff and have a decent web configurator, this is the best one that I've come across. So to conclude, the Glove80 is a great typing experience, and the support shown by MoErgo at the outset of these keyboards going out is fantastic. However, I do think there's a couple of shortcomings you need to be aware of if you're sensitive to such issues. At $399 is an expensive keyboard. It might not be up to the eye-watering cost of the Advantage 360, but $399 is a fair chunk of change. And given that price point, I'm a little disappointed in the materials and the feel of this keyboard. It just doesn't, to me, feel particularly premium. Now, I've had plenty of assurance from MoErgo that the materials used are absolutely premium, and it's been through a number of materials tests to ensure, that this is a quality product, and I do not doubt them at all in that regard. All I'm saying to you is that when you get it out of the box, I don't think it feels premium. Personally, I like my boards to feel a bit more solid, particularly if that relates to the acoustics of the keyboard. I'd rather suffer a bit of extra weight and mass and get a nicer sounding keyboard. With such a slim chassis, I'm not even sure you could get something like a 1mm neoprene layer inside there to dampen the sound of the switches, but that's perhaps something I'll investigate in future. But the fact of the matter is, the Moonlander is a very thin keyboard, the Digma Raise is a very thin keyboard. This keyboard to me feels absolutely solid, whereas I don't feel this one does quite so much. Now, way up against that, the fact that this layout is an absolute triumph. It's very, very comfortable. The choc switches that I've, moaned about at times are supremely comfortable to type on for long periods of time, and the thumb cluster is very, very usable. No problems whatsoever. The white version, I feel, is particularly better choice if you can put up with the clicky noises, not try the browns. So I'm pleased to tell you the Glove80 is another serious contender in that space, which doesn't make your buying decisions any easier, but what a great problem to have. As the only off-the-shelf split keyboard with choc switches, wireless, full RGB lighting, and a decent web-based ZMK configurator, I think the Glove80 is another serious contender for your shortlist. As ever, let me know in the comments what you think, particularly if you've had one of these Glove80s. I'd love to know what your thoughts are after you've used it a little while. Other than that, I'll see you again in the next one.